So hello, I'm Alfie,
And I'm Molly.
and we're the producers over at Doc Theatre Productions, and we'd like to introduce to you Luke. So Luke, if you would like to tell everyone who you are, what you do.
My name is Luke Barnes. I'm a writer for stage and screen, I guess.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
fellow Liverpudlian, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I grew up in Formby in North Liverpool and live in Wavertree now.
And has all of your work always been Liverpool based, or do you pretty much cover the whole of the UK?
Very rarely, to be honest. I've actually not worked that much in Liverpool. Most of my work's been based in London or in the northeast. I've only made one show in Liverpool, really. I think so. Actually, I haven't really worked there that much, despite being from here. But yeah.
So obviously you write a lot for stage and screen. How did you get into that? How did that come about?
So I used to be an actor. I went to drama school initially. Went to drama school and I came out as an actor for about 4 years, and I was doing this long-running TV show. And about halfway through, I got really bored of it, and I was like, not bored of it. I was a bit dissatisfied with like the industry of being an actor and the lifestyle around that, and the sort of like lack of agency I think that comes with being an actor. People, I think to do it, you've got to absolutely love it. And you've got to like say, this is the thing I want to do with my life, and prepared to take all the sacrifices you've got to make that work. And I just don't think I was. So I made a show with my mate who was a much better actor than me, and the idea was, I just thought she was awesome, so we made the show together. And luckily, it went well, and we did it at Edinburgh. Well, Edinburgh initially, then it came to the portion it toured the UK, and she's now BAFTA superstar, and I managed to scrabble together a career doing this, and I'm really proud of it. I think in many ways it's probably the thing I'm most proud of for doing, because we did it all ourselves. It was just me and my couple of mates just like scrapping together to make this thing work, and people responded. And it was interesting. I was doing a writer's room last week, and I was talking to the exec on it, and he just like old school he's done massive television film, and he was like, it's an interesting thing, like the less it feels like making a school play, the less it feels exciting. It starts feeling like a job. And I was like, I do feel that like, this job is at its best when it's coming from a sense of shared purpose, I think, and like shared joy with people with a shared vision. It's not about necessarily just about making money or just about career steps, but it's about doing that thing that we think is important for the right reasons together, and that's how I got into it. And then I made that show, and luckily got a few commissions off the back of that. And then I met Middle Child, who are my like long-term collaborators, I suppose. We made like 4 shows with them now, and started making shows in Hull and in London as well, across the country with them, alongside with obviously the rest of my like general new writing stuff, and making work with like real people at the Young Vic or wherever across the country. And the screen stuff came later on, that's been my way into it, I suppose. But it all came from like quite an organic place, and that, it's interesting because I kind of feel like you never quite, you always feel like an imposter, and you always feel like you're trying to cobble it together. But the thing that roots it all in like purpose is like that sense of shared purpose and making things with your tribe. I think like, the more you can think about making things for reasons bigger than yourself, the more useful you become and the more joyous it becomes, I think. That's certainly been my experience anyway, I think.
Especially here at Lipper, where there's loads of actors, a lot of actors always say, oh, I'd love to be able to write. I think that's quite a talent that a lot of people struggle with, because, you can give an actor a script and they can make it their own, but to be able to actually sit there and write something off the top of your head or from a previous experience, I think a lot of people do struggle with, especially in our industry, which is why finding a good writer is always like finding a little bit of gold dust somewhere.
It's interesting though, because like I refute that anyone thinks they can't write. Like I never went to university. I've got no qualifications. I'm not an academic. know anything about literature, writing. Like, it's not my forte. You know, I think people taught themselves out of being able to do it because they think it's for people who aren't like them. And actually, it's kind of unhelpful, because ultimately writing a play or writing a film or writing a story is just two things. It's like, what do I care about and how do I like to tell stories? You know, it's really basic. And once you can identify things we care about and like the way that we tell stories, we can start to talk about the things we care about and the way we like them. And that's the whole game. Like, the rest of it's just craft. And the rest of the craft you know from being an actor. There's no gap between my knowledge and yours. You know? But like, we constantly talk ourselves out of the ability to do it because we say we're not Oxbridge people. And it's just like an absolute fallacy, because the thing that they have is confidence, because they have told they're clever and they've got high level education. What we have is authenticity, and we have viewpoints, we have lived experience, we have taste, and a cultural background that informs like who we are and the way we talk about stories. And if we can tap into that, it's worth tenfold when we think they're clever.
So obviously, being a writer, you spend a lot of your time probably sat in an office or sat in a coffee shop or somewhere, literally just reeling out thoughts and everything. So in a way, the pandemic probably hasn't changed much of how you work, or has it?
It's been horrible, man. I mean, like, it's been shit. I mean, like, I'm lucky that I've got work and I've had stuff to do, but like, as you know, like, most of our must engage with the world and trying to understand how we operate in our bodies and society, and how like we'd like to see the world change into it, because that's been void. It's been really hard to sort of like engage those conversations. So I'm lucky that I've been like finishing off stuff I've been doing. I'd already be developing anyway. And that's been fine, but like, you know, it only works. Art only works when you engage with the real world. And in this instance, it's like really hard to make work, because you don't feel like you're a part of that. And like, there's this thing that like, everyone's like, you've got this more time, you know, you've got so much more time to go and make stuff. You're like, well, fucking hell, what do you think like, what do you think I'm doing every day? Like, I'm working 10 till 6, trying to like, as an old job. You think I'm just going to work in the evenings now because the time's there?
Yeah.
It's not like you've been gifted this like extra time. You know, you're just telling people to stop resting. And that's ridiculous. So actually, you know, it's the same amount of time. It's more pressure because, you know, I suppose like the stuff you develop has to like have some kind of trajectory, because you know, next year we don't know what's going to happen. And we've been stripped of our best asset, which is the fact that we exist as humans. So actually, it's been infinitely harder than ever. You know, and the idea that people think artists should be more productive because there's more time is so unrealistic. Like, the experience of being an artist, you know.
We spoke to a theatre producer on one of the other interviews, and they were saying it's been great for me because I've had time to sit and plan everything properly, instead of being in 1,001 different meetings and having to run up and back to London. So I suppose in that sense for them it works. But like you said, for you, in order to write and be creative and engage with other creatives, we've all had that taken away.
A lot of like, I think what you write from as well is all the interactions you have with people, and obviously that's just been taken away. We're told to stay inside, and you know, there's not really much you can pull from sat looking at the same four walls.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you can read, but like, again, it's not a lived experience, so that you can't feel it. If you're not feeling your way into the world, then what? You know, it just becomes an intellectual exercise, and that's not necessarily useful. But yeah, and it's really hard to plan, because like, obviously I work across the mediums, but like in theatre especially, like, how do you plan for this stopping and starting and closing and stuff? So like, and what does the world look like, and what are the conversations you want to have, and we don't know what the world will look like in 3 months. Like, it really is the worst time to be making art, I feel, you know.
Yeah, actually attempting to, I mean, you look at what's happened recently, people open shows and they're just going a week later, close again. And I think the pandemic has done two things for our industry. I think in one sense, it's knocked a lot of people's confidence, and a lot of people have gone, what is the point? What is the point in me even trying to do something? And then I think for especially a lot of freelance artists who haven't had the government funding, haven't had the backup support of another company, it's been, well, we need to try and do as much as we physically can to keep the art alive and to keep doing what we do. And we were both saying that we think that the industry itself is going to be a bit of a nicer place to be.
Yeah, when we get back, because obviously everything's gone online now, because obviously we're not in theatres, or we're not in, working with each other in face to face. So a lot of it has gone a lot more social online, especially on Twitter. Everyone seems to be a bit more connected. So say like someone puts on, they need someone to do costume design. You can find someone on Twitter much easier than, just using the same group of people from London. So I think it is going to be a lot more sort of breaking down, the divide between the country.
Especially the north-south divide, which is a wonderful divide that we all deal with. So obviously you were saying that, did you say that you work with another company that, you work alongside?
I work with loads of people, but like the company I work the most with is Middle Child. Do you know Middle Child?
So talk us, for anyone watching, talk us through the process of writing something to getting it out there. What is your process and how does it work for you?
Well, I think there's like a few ways into it, and like one of them is obviously someone asks you to do something, which is pretty straightforward. They ask you to do it, and you're like, you say yeah, you don't, you do it, you don't. But like, my process is about. Well, the first thing you've got to try and think of, or try and like work out, is like what you want to talk about, why you want to talk about this thing. I know this sounds really like reductive, but like I think a lot of people fail because they start from the place of trying to think of a good idea, and like that's kind of unuseful, because what you're responding to in that instance is you're responding to like the zeitgeist, and you're responding to like what is good in the eyes of a very small number of buildings and tastes. So the first thing we've got to try and work out is like what we want to talk about and what we think is important to like address in the world, and have a conversation as to better our community and better our understanding of ourselves and how we interact with each other. So we start there, and that's like got it. The question is like, how is this honest? How is this true? And it's always like, if I feel like in my body that I feel this is like a real thing, then maybe we talk about it. And the next thing is like, okay, if I want to talk about this thing, then why am I talking about it? What's my take on this thing? What is like the significance of my body in this conversation? So ask yourself that question and move into like, well, okay, well, if I have this conversation, what's the change I'd like to see? Articulate those things first, and then we're talking about, then it's like, well, where would be, well, even that really. After you've done that, it's like, well, okay, well, how would I tell this story? What is like my way into this that I think will reach the people I want to reach that need to hear the story? And then sort of like articulate those things, and then I'll put together like just a pitch document, because I've been doing it for a decade. I can kind of like at that stage I can either approach buildings or companies or producers to try and help put together pitches to pay me to write it and make it with a production plan in mind. And then I'll sort of like make that conversation. We'll talk it through. We'll talk through this pitch document until it's all signed. We're agreeing on the same page, and hopefully we'll find some money, then I'll write it, and then we'll make it, hopefully. But that's the kind of like logistical process through it. And like, obviously, that's a very brief overview of the actual process of making shit, because like, it's obviously more, it's obviously like a fucking nightmare. The whole thing's obviously really difficult and complicated and like political and all those things. But on the most primary level, the big question is, what am I talking about? Why am I talking about? And how would I have that conversation to elicit a change in the world that I want to see? And like, those are the questions I think young artists never ask when I teach. They always say, I've written this thing that I think is good. I'm like, fucking sorry. There's no value in what you think is good. There's only value in what you think is meaningful, and what is honest, and like what is you. Like, because good is actually someone else's idea. It's just that you've copied that and you've like been influenced by it. Like, what Rob Ike does isn't necessarily what you think is enjoyable or important or meaningful or whatever. Not to pick at him being bad, but like, just as an example, he's a high profile theatre maker, and what we need to like encourage like younger artists is to really hone in on like what I think is important, what I care about, what the change I want to see, and what my taste in culture is. Because if you live in Liverpool, I don't assume you live in Liverpool, like the way that we consume culture in the city, and the way that we tell stories, and the way that we socialize and evaluate and look at ourselves is very different than the way people do it in, say, Gloucestershire. Well, Gloucestershire, like, I don't know, trying to think of somewhere posh, Guildford, right? It's a very different sort of like cultural conversation, and like or Berlin, right? So like the way that we tell stories and we tell stories in the city, we have to be aware of the way that happens, right? The way that we engage in it. We can mimic that, or we can rebel against it, or whatever it is, but we're aware of what happens here. We're aware of how we are significant in that conversation. So it boils down to that primitive questioning. What do I care about? How can I talk about it in my culture, in my world, if we're making work here? And then the next thing is like, obviously just like work out characters and story and drama and all those things, but you know, that's craft. We all know about that, because like if you're an actor, you know the simple questions like, what's my super objective? What's my super obstacle? What are my actions? How do I conquer that? Scene by scene, what are those questions? And that's that story structure. That's it. Like there's no secret to it. It's not like some mad convoluted English literature Oxbridge secret of how stories made. It's very simple and primal. We can move our way through that with honest characters, then that's a play, right? Like it's not rocket science. Not rocket science. It's not like some unachievable thing that only clever people can do. Like we all constantly tell stories. We're all constantly involved in culture. We all constantly live. We constantly care. So why can't we put those two things together and just like tell a story in a space with people? You know,
we were saying that with someone else, and we find that it's mainly regional theatres now that want to work with young writers. A lot of people have a lot of theatres have a lot of schemes now where they get loads of writers in a room and they'll say, what we got, what can we produce? And we were saying with someone else that London isn't the be all and end all anymore. I mean, London has the big theatres, but there's none of the shows really have substance, or you know, a lot of things in London are just put there to
make money.
Depends on where you go, man. I mean, like London obviously makes a lot of like awesome work, but again, I keep saying this, like I lived there for a long time, and like the issue that we have with the hierarchical status of theatre in this building is that they're inherited from someone else. You know, the idea that like those theatres are the end point for a career come from a very small group of men from Oxbridge and Eton. Like we have to like reimagine our idea of success for our own parameters and our own criteria. You know, if we want to make work, you know, for someone, for like, I don't know, for anyone like making, for me, like I had to I try and phrase it in my head as like the next thing that I talk about that I think is important for, if I can reach these people, have this conversation, do it in the way I can, make money, make a living, that's fucking winning by anyone's standard. By anyone's standard. You know, and obviously like it's cool to make work at the Young Vic or Hampstead or Soho or whatever. Like obviously I've made work in those places. That's cool, but that's not the end goal. The important thing is the conversation, how you have those conversations, and the people you reach and the change you want to see. These are the primary questions you've got to ask. It's not about the building or the partners necessarily. Those things may come if you want them to, because you answer those questions. The first thing is the primal questions of what do I care about, the change I want to see. If you aim solely for like the sort of like arbitrary thing of like, I want to collaborate in these buildings with these people, you'll fail, because you're just trying to, what you'll do is you'll try to replicate type of work that you think they like and replicate type of conversation you think they think is important, and it'll be inauthentic. It won't be you, and it'll be a shit second-hand version of what you've already seen there. Like it happens all the time. The only thing you can ever do as an artist is fully admit what you think is important, who you are, and what you want, change you want to see, and how you want to do that. And that's how we generate work and find collaborators and find purpose in ourselves and all those things. You know, find money, because like no one's going to fund the Landed project. They might fund something that might save someone else's life. You know,
I think that's a really poignant view, and something that a lot of, I mean, I find in Lipper a lot of the actors set up their own companies, and a lot of them do. I mean, over like my years of being here, we've started to see the work has progressed a lot more, and people are doing, you know, shows and performances and writing plays that have really good messages behind it that you wouldn't necessarily see done at the Old Vic, or you wouldn't see done in a big, massive theatre. And I think that that's something that the pandemic has highlighted as well, is that people have had time to sit there and think, all right, working for a big, fancy, glitzy theatre company is great, but I'm not getting any reward in myself out of this. I'm just going along and just doing something for someone else instead of creating their own work. How was the pandemic for you? Did you do anything artistically to help other artists, or was you obviously still churning out work as much as you could?
The first part of it, I raised a lot of money for artists who, because at the start of the pandemic, there's a period of time where obviously theatres closed and a lot of like restaurants or whatever, like, you know, service industries closed. A lot of artists fell with the gap financially for a brief period of time. So I raised a lot of money then, not loads, about 10,000 or something, and like gave it to artists in the city region who couldn't pay their rent that month or whatever. That was my first part of it, to help people. I found workshops throughout the whole thing, free workshops for people. I've set up, actually done quite a lot of that. I set up like Q&As with artists who are friends of mine for people who might be interested, and obviously been writing myself as well. So yeah, I mean, you know, I'm very privileged in that, you know, I've made a living for this for a while, and like what I have is I have friends with goodwill who have things to share with people, and I've fucked up in every way you can imagine, so I can share those stories. And like, there's nothing to be gained from harboring experiences. Like, no one's gonna get rich off it. No one's gonna get fame off it. No one's gonna find love from it. No one's gonna find self-respect from it. It just means that you think you're boss and no one else knows it. So, you know, we try to, like, I think the important thing is trying to share my experiences and skill set with people who might benefit from that, I think. And I think actually what's been really encouraging is that that's been a viewpoint, I think, shared across the industry, really. Yeah. A lot of people have given up their time to do that. Because why the fuck not? You're like, what are you going to do? You can sit and listen to your kids, or you can talk to people about stuff you miss. You know?
It's people that are very good at what they do feel like they should just keep that to themselves, and if they share it with anyone else, it's going to be taken away from them, and they're not going to be this great big writer.
But again, I'm going to keep saying this, like, that mentality is so unuseful, because, you know, if we have to accept the first fundamental that is, like, we all exist in bodies, we all have a body, right? And if we go from the perspective of, like, our body has a perspective on the world because of its, like, because what it is, where it is, you know, what it likes, what it dislikes. If we all accept that, like, we all individual experiences and we all meet the world in different ways, and we all have things we need to talk about and deal with, and we all have things that we think that we'll benefit from for, like, talking about, then we have no competition, because it's just us dealing with shit, like, with the hope that, like, through doing this, we all might benefit from it by doing it publicly, by having this conversation. So harboring a skill set isn't useful. It's not giving you an advantage. The only thing that gives you an advantage when you deny, the only things that give you a disadvantage, you deny who you are, and you think that what you have, you deprive other people of what you have will benefit you, which is absolutely fucking nuts. Like, you know, if we want to generally care about the art form and want to see this improve, we have to start thinking about sharing skill sets, learning mutual labor exchange, mutual skills exchange, and having the conversations that make the world better. You know, like, there's no fucking money in this industry. You're not going to get rich off it. So, like, what the fuck are you harboring? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in a nutshell. For anyone watching this, obviously we're going to be releasing these in January and February. That's when they'll be available for everyone to see. What should we look out for from you? What is in the works that you're allowed to say, or what should everybody keep an eye out for?
Hey, I've got loads of projects supposed to be happening, but we'll fucking see. No idea, man. No idea. I mean, supposed to have 3 shows next year, but fuck knows.
No one knows what's going on anymore.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, I'm hoping that as of springtime, we'll start to see some normality and be able to plan a bit better. But at the moment, like, fuck knows.
Yeah. Have you worked on any digital projects during the pandemic at all?
Yeah, I made a show with Headlong and David Morrissey and Leanne Best called The Ghost Caller. Which was like a digital project audio thing made around Halloween, and you sort of like phone this, well, you text this number, and this sounds shit when you talk about it, was fucking awesome. Like this this ghost ring you, and it's like, and it's sort of like it's this like mind game where it gets you to think that it's your like someone you've lost recently asking you how you live and how to reflect on how to live in the future. But I'd made that. I don't think you can get it anymore, but maybe. Have a look on the headline website.
We'll have a look. And there's obviously a lot of people have found that this is a new way of working digitally and online. I personally would much rather be stood back in a theatre. So for you, how have you enjoyed the switch to digital a lot more or not?
I mean, I've been working mostly in screen over the last year. And like, it's fine. I mean, theatre's my background. It's what I've done since I was 18. So like, I really, really miss it. I really miss it. Like, I'm looking forward to being able to start making stuff again, to be honest, in rooms. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, like, I'm not a massive fan of digital theatre because I think the two things are antonyms, really. Like, the whole point of theatre is about shared experience and communal coming together in community, and being in that space as one. Anything else just feels like a bad film to me. But maybe that's me being a dick. But I think we'll learn a lot of lessons about it, though. I mean, one of the plus sides is that I've been able to we've all been able to see work from across the world that I never would have been able to get a chance to see. Like my knowledge of my exposure to like international theatre has been insane, and like I really hope that stays up because we can't always go to Poland to go and see a play, and like the other thing is like sharing work across the country is useful, but it's like how you do that without detracting from ticket sales and all that thing. So I don't know, but I think there's something in that I think has become useful. It's not the whole experience, but like listening to records isn't a live experience either. So I don't know, but yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But for major companies, I think, if they had a show and it closed 5 years ago, why not release it online and make a little bit of extra cash? But like you said, when there's theatres and venues relying on box office sales, we need to still keep live theatre alive. But there could, once the run's finished, then be a digital release for people that can't afford to travel to see it or are away, not in the country.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So I think you've reiterated it a couple of times, but just the last one. Any advice to any young writers out there?
I'm just going to say the same thing again. Seriously, like honestly, who you are, what you care about, who you are, what you want to talk about, how you can talk about that thing. Hone on those two things, and like the way to read as much as you can, make as many friends as you can, and the biggest thing is finding a tribe, man. It's like find those people that want to do the same thing as you. Like you'll waste so much of your life knocking on doors with people who just fucking unnatural marriages, and what'll happen is it won't work out, and you'll feel bad about yourself. You just have to question yourself, like actually, it's not about that. It's about finding the right people to work with, not the people that someone else tells someone else tells you are good. Like, if you fucking, I'm just making this up, but like if you fucking love clowns, then like there's absolutely no point resting your self-esteem on the RSC. Like it's fucking stupid, but someone else will tell you that they're the be all end all. It's like finding your people, and not just like theatrically, but the shared things you care about, who see the same utopia you believe in, who like have the same concerns, and make work with them over and over again. You'll find money for it easier. You'll find audiences easier. You'll find self-esteem easier. You'll find purpose and meaning easier. You'll get less rejection. Why the fuck wouldn't you do it?
I think that's yeah, a good place to finish.
Yeah.
So anything else from you?
No, it's been nice.
It's been interesting because we come from a producing side, so obviously we just get a writer or director and this is what we want to produce, but it's nice to see it from the other end of the spectrum.
It's the same questions, right? Surely you have just because you're a producer, you don't have concerns and utopias and ideas and forms and blah 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 that exist beyond money. It's the same thing. It's like
I would never produce something just for the money, because if I'm not interested in it and I don't have a passion for what I'm trying to produce, then what's the point in doing it?
Well, exactly.
But yeah,
exactly. Same question.
As well, because a lot of what we get taught as producers, it often puts the thought in our mind that we can't be creative.
Yeah.
I think that's the sort of thing we need to step out and we can as producers have a bit of creativity, and
we're not just budgets and emails.
I have loads. I mean, like my favorite producers are the ones who say, like, you initiate projects by saying, look, I want to explore blah 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 blah. Maybe if I pair so and so with so and so, give them this provocation, find whatever, somebody to make them do it. That's the most creative thing you can be doing. And matchmaking is the most exciting part of the whole fucking process.
Well, thank you very much, Luke.
You're welcome.
Everything from us.